Good morning. This morning at the Privacy and Ethics Committee, I've asked my colleagues in the Liberal and Conservative Party to work with us to launch an investigation and inquiry into the industrial use of personal data information that was used by Cambridge Analytica that may have affected the American election, the role of Facebook in not addressing this massive breach, and what it means for the democratic process of our country. I guess the question that we also have to ask ourselves is, are we surprised, given the cavalier attitude that we see towards the growing control of the private information of Canadians by a few very large transnational information oligarchies, the ability of this misuse of information to possibly influence or even affect and undermine what is, in the United States case, would be the most powerful democracy in the world. What does that mean for citizens' accountability? What does that mean for democratic processes? So as we launch a parliamentary inquiry, we need to look at this in the much larger context of the power, the growing power of organizations, companies like Facebook, that seem to see themselves as above national law, the issues of third-party bad actors who are using massive amounts of private information of citizens around the world to make political, to undermine or to interfere with political processes. We're also asking the Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, when he meets with the G7, to take this up with his international counterparts. The issue of the sanctity of the democratic process, of the privacy of information that belongs to citizens around the world, has to be seen in this much broader transnational context. We believe the Prime Minister is well suited at the G7 to raise this. We're asking him to make a commitment that he will raise this, and that we start to address the need to put some kind of international frame and some kind of international obligation on large actors like Facebook, and also to start dealing with the potential undermining of whether it's civic rights or democratic rights of citizens around the world through third-party actors. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mathieu Dubé.
Thank you, Charlie. Juste rapidement, en français et en anglais, comme porte-parole en matière de sécurité publique, ce qu'on constate, c'est qu'il y a des entreprises privées, il y a des agences de sécurité nationale et aussi des acteurs internationaux, donc d'autres pays, entre autres, qui sont en train de bonifier leur capacité en termes de cyberattaques, d'utilisation néfaste des informations privées des gens. Et ça, c'est quelque chose qui ne peut pas continuer. What we're seeing is a worrying trend. We're seeing national security agencies, we're seeing foreign state actors, we're seeing private companies all obtaining more and more private information and beefing up their capacities to use that information for nefarious means, and that's something that's extremely concerning. It's something that I think Canadians are very concerned about, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are being left in the dust on this. They're the ones whose private information is at risk, and I think it's our responsibility as parliamentarians and the Liberals' responsibility as the government to play a leadership role and to demand more accountability from these companies, but also making sure that that we're not engaging in what we almost see as a cyber arms race, which is extremely concerning, in particular in light of these kinds of information coming out. And unfortunately, this seems to be only the tip of the iceberg, and we're calling on the government to act now. On demande au gouvernement d'agir immédiatement, parce que je crois fermement que c'est simplement la pointe de l'iceberg pour un enjeu qui va être extrêmement important dans les prochaines années, et c'est la responsabilité des libéraux de démontrer du leadership là-dessus et d'exiger des comptes et des entreprises privées et aussi des autres compagnies, des autres pays, pardon, qui s'engagent dans de telles activités qui menacent la vie privée des Canadiens.
One of the interesting aspects of this is that we've seen data accumulation in privacy questions, but also too is the development of and the emergence of beyond cottage industries of that information to actually economic development, and the lack of standards and the lack of accountability for it. So the G7 is an appropriate discussion point to start to have this. If one country is encouraging predatory practices and industrial development based upon I guess, loose and easy laws around privacy and the use of information, it will basically create a larger global problem. So as we look at this issue and it evolves, clearly it is multifaceted and requires an intensive effort. So I'm proud to be part of an effort here to rein this in at a certain point before we actually have further breaches. And in conclusion, it is important that Canada can take an opportunity here to lead the way in this. It's an opportunity that we have, and it shouldn't be wasted.
What kind of questions do you have for Facebook and all of this?
Well, everybody lives on Facebook. My wife says I don't get up in the morning until I've checked Facebook. And Facebook seems to have a very cavalier attitude towards the protection of private information. What we're really disturbed is that apparently Facebook was made aware that this information was being gathered and did nothing to stop that. I think that that's unacceptable, because what's come out of the allegations about Cambridge Analytica was the ability to subvert Facebook, to use the stories, the chats that people have to create the perfect propaganda machine. And we have to say to Facebook, you're not all that cool in the world. You're not the cool kid on the block anymore. You're a massive international player. And if you have the ability to distort the outcome of elections, then you need to be held to a higher account. And we need to maybe start to look at a global transnational framework for dealing with giant information utilities like Facebook.
What do you say, though, to Canadians, I mean, are giving up their private information to a private corporation here? What do you say to people who would simply say to you, I told you so?
Well, I think the issue is that we saw the development of the internet, and I've been a digital utopian since I first got my Mac Plus back in the 80s, that we saw the idea that we don't regulate, that we allow the internet to open and develop because we wanted to see where it went. But unfortunately, it's going from a utopian vision to a very dystopian right now. And the interference, and we've seen with information wars, as my colleague said, a cyber information war. And Canadians are deeply engaged in all manner of social media, and it's good. It's a great form of communication. But there has to be some levels of accountability, and that goes to the corporate head office. That Facebook mines our information, Facebook gathers our information. Facebook also has a legal international responsibility, I believe, to protect our information from bad actors and from people who would subvert that to create propaganda tools for nefarious or undermining purposes.
Could the privacy commissioners have already reacted to this, right? Says it's raises serious concerns, wants to know if any Canadians have been affected, wants to ask those questions to Facebook. So what more are you asking for? What do you think of the reaction from Canada's privacy commissioner? And it seems like you're asking for additional steps, more perhaps stringent steps, and maybe more repercussions if anything is untoward for Canadians' privacy in terms of Facebook.
Well, there's three fundamental steps that have to take place, and we're very pleased that the privacy commissioner took the first step, which is just to say, was the data of Canadians inappropriately used? That will be very helpful. But that doesn't address what is the second step, which is how was this information used to create political profiling machines. That's something that can be dealt with at the Privacy and Information Committee, because we have to say, are these third-party actors using that information inappropriately for political purposes? And then that leads us to the third step, is how do we, even within the Canadian Parliament, hold Facebook and Google and Amazon and these other information giants to some level of accountability, given the transnational nature of what is becoming an information war and propaganda vehicles that are well beyond borders. That is why we're asking the Prime Minister to raise this at the G7 with his colleagues, because internationally we all have to address this. We have to protect data internationally, and we should maintain an open forum of social media that is engaging, that people can participate in, that people argue in. It is a very, very powerful tool for the good, but we need some manner of making sure that it is not undermined.
Could this potentially mean further regulatory measures before the election in 2019?
In terms of the electoral process, we certainly need to look at the power of third-party actors, bots, false news, interference. I'm glad that is on the radar, but given this latest scandal, it shows just how complex and how big this is. Brian, did you?
Well, I just wanted to, from a consumer protection perspective, as read the fine print isn't good enough because Facebook and other types of conglomerates that are accumulating this data are also changing the use and the distribution of that data on a regular basis, for sometimes for things that they don't even know when they're actually collecting it. So there has to be a set of rules in place, and there has to be a little bit more of an evolved policy to protect consumers and also about the use of that data, even also the right to be no longer remembered. There's a number of different things that have to be looked at. I mean, these affect consumer purchasing issues. They're used quite, for not only just for research, but also for development. But again, lastly, read the fine print is not good enough anymore because of the evolution of the data's usage is different than ever before. And we don't purchase cars that way. We don't purchase other types of things. There has to be, I think, a much more evolved policy of privacy protection and the use of that data on how we're exposed as consumers and how that is actually done in the fair market, because other companies, competition, and so forth are all affected by what's taking place in a different format than ever before, and that responsibility includes everything from drugs to the types of products that we select for our personal usage, and lastly, to things that we need to show some type of, I guess, non-bias for competition in the open market.
Monsieur Dubé.
Oui.
Merci. À part le fait de demander à M. Trudeau d'en parler au sommet du G7, vous voulez quoi dans le pratico-pratique? Qu'est-ce que vous voulez comme geste posé?
Il y a plusieurs choses. Il y a que le gouvernement en parle, qu'on commence à mettre à jour notre législation en ce qui concerne la protection à la vie privée, qu'on accepte d'entamer des études en comité parlementaire, qu'on creuse plus loin dans les capacités de Facebook et qu'on exige plus de ces entreprises-là. Oui, on parle d'élections, mais ça va plus loin que ça. Ça démontre qu'on a une capacité d'utiliser l'information privée des citoyens à toutes sortes de fins, et je pense que l'encadrement gouvernemental qui existe n'est pas là, et je pense que le gouvernement a une responsabilité d'agir dans ce sens.
Mais quel contrôle est-ce que le gouvernement peut avoir sur Facebook, une entreprise qu'il n'est même pas capable de taxer, là?
Bien, le fait de ne pas les taxer, c'est un choix qu'ils ont fait, c'est le mauvais choix. Alors ça, justement, il y a des choix à faire. Ça, c'est un choix. Mais pour protéger la vie privée, il y a aussi des choix à faire. On peut imposer des exigences pour dévoiler des fuites d'informations. On peut imposer des amendes quand ce n'est pas respecté. On peut bonifier nos lois pour assurer qu'on protège l'information privée des Canadiens. C'est ça qu'on demande, en plus de demander du leadership sur la scène internationale de la part du gouvernement et de M. Trudeau. Merci.